First of all, I'm Cornelius Blanding with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. We work with co-ops all around the South. And one thing that I noticed first and foremost was that there was not much representation in terms of converting these manufactured home communities into cooperatives in the South. And that's one of the conversations that I've been having with Liz Bailey, with folks from Rock USA, say how can we work in that space to work with Rock USA and others to look at the South as a market to convert a lot of those homes into those communities into co-ops. But also more importantly, folks in South Carolina was one of the big emphasis. So the congressman's remarks in terms of, so I've been making relationships with a lot of folks around trying to look at how do we, one, bring this model to the South, and two, how do we work and partner with people like the congressman, people like Rural Electric, the credit union movement, talking to Cliff and everybody else, how do we connect the dots in the South to make sure we fill that space? But I've heard a lot of good things, and so I'm looking forward to kind of joining in and sitting down and shifting the conversation to the South.
I guess what I'm looking at grabbing straws at how we can engage the rural electric co-ops more actively in this process and the credit unions. That's what I was searching for, and seeing if, because they already are out there in rural Wisconsin and elsewhere, if there are legal barriers to that, or is it just purely communication, and making them more active partners in this whole process, be it either conversion or new construction.
I was just going to say the effort that is going on our end in Wisconsin includes, again, the Housing Finance Agency, WHEDA, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development, and North Country Cooperative Foundation, which is one of our certified network members. And yeah, they got their special passports to go across the border there.
Okay, well, what about to Iowa? Okay, Shelley, what did you hear? Iowa, they can do Iowa too? Okay, Shelley, what did you learn here? What are your next steps?
Well, since we don't have a professional football team in Iowa, we allow Minnesotans and Wisconsins in whenever. But I wanted to say, well, to go back to, we don't do a lot with manufactured housing, if anything, but we are interested. We definitely have people that are on our lines that are in manufactured housing that could use energy efficiency grants, loans, whatever. I mean, that's why my boss was really happy that Liz invited him, but that he could send me out to gather up information and bring it back. And like I said, I mean, we address gaps in services. We have a history of doing that. We have a history of raising capital to answer those needs, and that's what we'll do. We also, my boss had a meeting with Undersecretary Tonziger about he had heard about our own energy efficiency loan and grant program, and it's very successful and very highly subscribed, and we've put a lot of capital into it, and it's worked out really well. So we provided information, and now hearing Mike's presentation today, I'm thinking about, and this is kind of where I come from, my pre-housing experience was working for a member of Congress and working in the state. So the on-the-ground showing how appropriations work on the ground is something that I did a lot for my member, and I know how effective it can be. In Iowa, we're blessed. We're a little schizophrenic because we got Tom Harkin, and we got Steve King, and we've got Tom Latham and Senator Grassley, who are all big fans of rural electric cooperatives and are also big fans of Homeward. And so we've been able to make the case over the years that this type of, there wasn't funding in any of the federal programs, in USDA or in HUD really, that would help us expand these new lines of business programming, construction finance funding, those kinds of things. And so we were lucky to get that little scoop of money to come in with ours that leveraged a lot of other dough. Private capital, small bank loans, basically getting small banks, because there aren't a lot of big banks out there in rural Iowa. So I'm thinking of what can we do to follow up with our members of Congress and educating their staff and kind of developing this idea of the ROCs. I think Iowa would be a really good place to explore that a little bit more. We certainly have a lot of both populations there, manufactured housing communities and also elderly in small towns.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Good. So one of you might have had a map had we let you use visuals. Has anybody mapped where all the mobile home parks are that? So we can, if all interested, Shelley, you can go look at the HAC website and figure that. All right, we're going to go over here. Steve's been quiet all day, but he's head with the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association in charge of housing. So it's the man to know how we're going to get it scaled up nationwide.
I don't know, but that's what we're looking for with Steve Johnson from NRECA. We're interested in the same things that Shar is at probably more of a macro level. We have a blue ribbon committee that's spending most of this year. It's called the Committee on Cooperatives in the 21st Century, trying to decide what it is that an electric cooperative should look like 10 and 15 years from now as we get away from the population, the graying population that saw their electric cooperative as a center of the community, the people who brought light to the community, to a younger cadre, to the extent they're still in rural areas, that sees the electric cooperative as no more than a power provider, just like an investor-owned utility. So what our folks are doing is to try and take a comprehensive look at how an electric cooperative can improve not the electricity in an area, but a quality of life. And to do that necessarily means forming some kind of partnerships as undefined with housing cooperatives, healthcare cooperatives, especially because of the predominance of senior citizens in our service territories. I don't have any answers. I'm not even sure we know what the questions are yet, but this has helped formulate some questions for us. And hopefully at the end of the year, we can have a report that outlines a role for co-ops together. There's strength in numbers.
This has been an amazing day for me in terms of learning. I think I came to it thinking I didn't know much about co-ops, but having grown up in very rural America, all day I've been reminded of all the times the co-ops have crossed my life, right? In terms of the way we got our energy. I'm a member of the credit union that's a co-op, right? Lots of intersections. One thing I learned really from Shar in Wisconsin, that's a beautiful model of a small cluster for a very small town of affordable housing for elderly. I want to try that at home and see that replicated across the country. I think that's just one example. And the connections today that we will be able to make, I think, are very helpful. Some next steps, I think we, CFED, and Next Step, Rock USA, I'd like to see us reach out more to the Trade Association for the Rural Co-ops, I may not get the name right, to talk more about energy efficiency and how that's important to our work, and also how mobile home replacement is also central to our work, that we can work together on policy.
I think one of the important things, I think, going forward is looking at how, again, we've heard the message about co-ops working together, but I think in specific examples are like the multi-stakeholder co-op that Liz mentioned, where you can have home care, worker co-ops working with elderly living situations. And in some cases, the elders, you may have to have the children of those elderly actually be co-op members. So they're involved in the care and the housing as the seniors get really old. So there's ways of bringing more people in. And I think one of the most important things is cooperatives helping spawn new businesses. And I've done some research on the agricultural side of farmer cooperatives. And in that, I found a lot of some local farm supply cooperatives got started in broader, propane for homes and stuff, propane distribution, working actually with rural electrics. And actually the rural electrics joined with them in like a joint venture to do this. And then eventually the rural electrics just, withdrew from it and once it got started. So what the point being, starting new businesses. And that's somewhat related to finance, but in some ways it's just the, various types of co-ops. And you know, in some of our farmer cooperatives are doing a lot with energy, has been said, and also with, you know, land improvement and things like that. So bringing together, you know, different types of cooperatives, I think, is going to be important. And I'm hoping our BNI loan guarantee program is it's in the phase now of going to. It should have announced some enhancements that will be available. I think in June it'll appear in the Federal Register for comment, and a lot of those enhancements will provide for even preferred stock, loan guarantees for preferred stock for startup businesses or any type of business that needs preferred stock and they don't have a good market for it, that we would be able to do a loan guarantee for that. And we have provisions for the loan guarantee to help worker ownership, employee ownership through ESOPs or worker co-ops, where they can do fund these things in stages. They can do the loan guarantee in stages. We haven't been able to do that before. We've had to do a one-time, like if a business is going to be converted, it's got to be a one-time buyout, so therefore you don't have any succession. So we're hoping that with this phased in stages, it'll support more types of ownership by the employees in businesses, and that can link into the multi-stakeholder for food co-ops, housing, whatever.
I thought it was a great day. For me, it was really more learning about the industry itself and how manufactured housing is really a good option for low-income seniors. I thought the panel discussions were great, and really the examples were really good in terms of really seeing how it's a great option. And in terms of next steps for me, I'd be interested in talking to Mike just to see if there might be an opportunity for us to just explore to see if the bank might be a lender in one of your financings. So we should definitely get together.
So this was a great day to get myself re-immersed in an area that I've spent time with in the past. I mentioned to Bruce the first manufactured housing cooperative in New Hampshire was actually a student project of one of my students many years ago who took my co-op course and a course on community economics with my colleague Michael Swack, and brilliantly took away something out of it that I don't think either of us imagined would come out of it. And so seeing this being such an important part of the strategy discussed here was really very gratifying. I want to echo Bruce's point that I think one of the policy challenges is that there's a lot of existing businesses with retiring owners in rural areas, and we need to broaden our concept of job creation to include job preservation. And there's opportunities around creating housing for seniors that's not just around health cooperatives like the wonderful stuff in Wisconsin, but also other types of cooperatives that could be property management, landscaping businesses, that really are ways to ensure that people can stay in their housing and do it affordably. So I think next steps are around the policy questions around how do we preserve jobs, and also how do we ensure good asset management strategies that are coupled with the housing.
This is real helpful for me because I know the ROC model, but I don't really know how it fits in with this larger cooperative world. So I kind of learned a lot. And same with Stacy. I didn't realize, yeah, I'm part of a cooperative. I'm in several credit unions, and I didn't realize, I hate to admit that. What was useful for me today, I'm seeing more growing intersections between our social enterprises with ROC and Next Step, finding areas where they may work together. I'm going to do next step for myself. I'm going to do more research into the new markets tax credits and take a look and see, with both of these social enterprises, how that may intersect. The whole energy efficiency question, we've been talking a lot about this in I'm Home, and sort of how we know about the energy efficiency. How do you make the argument? How do you sell it? And sort of how do you, quantify the savings in a way that really works for the homeowners? And then sort of an aha moment thinking about, as we're setting up these ROCs, and we know that it's a pretty good deal for the tenants and that they're staying put. It's too difficult to move the home. This whole intersection with the health aspect to me is really fascinating. I think that's a place where I'd like to see I'm Home move, because I think as you start to get some years under your belt with these ROCs, you're going to have some serious naturally occurring retirement communities and with a lot of healthcare issues, and that issue itself is just huge in the existing NORCs, but you're going to have these models. And I meant to mention there was a study, University of Seattle, looking at manufactured housing and ORCs. So that's, I think it's just been a real helpful day for me, and just thinking that through and what that might mean and what the next steps might be there. Helpful.
Well, for me, this was very good orientation. It kind of, as somebody who was part of the very original DAMP programs back in New York City, the alternative management programs, it's good to see how far the co-op movement has gone in the last 20 years, but also interesting to see the same issues that were dealt with back then remain the issues today, having to do with the taking the, phrasing it as the round hole of the co-op model and fitting it into traditional financing mechanisms that don't even understand the round hole and how to make things fit, and that it really does come back to the basic issue of the resident in terms of housing co-ops, of matching the residents' interest in retaining, promoting, and improving their housing situation, and finding the capital in order to make that happen to them.
I like to see the involvement and hear of what was going on in South Carolina, and particularly with the rural electrics. And then I jotted down here, why not employer-assisted housing through rural electrics and offer that kind of a program? This whole idea of co-ops helping co-ops is fantastic. I'm active with the National Association of Housing Co-ops, and we've been talking a lot about why can't we get more housing co-op corporate funds into credit unions? And somebody said, well, that's illegal. And then someone else from NCUA said, nope, there's nothing in the law that says you can't have a housing co-op put its funds into a credit union, but a whole lot of credit unions say you can't do it in their membership policy. So that was back to Cliff's point about, do they know they're a co-op? I hope we don't lose sight of, and I was thinking as we're looking at the economic impact of the park conversions, this is not just a title swap, that what happens both in the infrastructure investment is a job creation thing, and I think someone has done some research to see that there is new investment that goes into the parks. Once the conversion is there, the threat of being evicted is gone. They can take the 1975 model and get it off the property and put on a new one that's much more energy efficient. So that, and we need to put in that multiplier calculation. It's not just saving energy, but it's making another $35,000 investment. And my last piece was, as we were thinking about hearing about the USDA programs, in the previous administration, they were trying to get rid of the HUD Office of Rural Housing. The current administration seems to be trying to get all the housing USDA programs transferred over to HUD, but all of that also needs appropriations, and that's not a pretty picture either.
So I'm really inspired by the many different angles by which we're approaching this topic, and the incredible resources that are already out there that are moving in the direction of making this kind of housing, affordable housing, available in rural communities. And as I was listening to some of the others speak, I began to think about a David Thompson article that I read several years ago called Clustering Co-op Development. He had come back from Italy, and he was talking about what makes the Italian cooperatives so successful. And what makes them successful is that they have many different cooperatives that are parts of the same value chain that influence each other and support each other and buy and sell to each other. And this was reinforced again when I was studying at Southern New Hampshire University. We read Michael Porter. He's a Harvard professor, and he wrote a study about the Berkshires, talking about clustering co-op development in rural communities. So this is so we have manufactured housing, and we're helping, you know, seniors, you know, with manufactured housing, and then with the home care aspect and the construction aspect and the aspect that relates to the energy cooperatives and their resources and the credit unions. You really can see how in a particular rural area that is, you know, inclined toward this, that you could really jumpstart the rural economies of America. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I'd like to commend everyone who put this forum together. It's fantastic.
I think my biggest takeaway from this is to just think big and keep working. I think there's so much more that we do around the table that is the same than it is different, and we should just keep at it and keep working with each other and think big and don't get stuck in our spreadsheets that I have to look at when I go back to my office this afternoon.
20 years ago in my former job when I started Campaign for Human Development, we made a series of grants to cooperatively owned, worker-owned home health care outfits and put together a little initiative that unfortunately didn't get very far. But at that time, I went to one of the CDF forums and so forth, and that was great. So it's nice to be here. It's nice to be reminded about all this and about the scale. I mentioned earlier I currently work with Institute for Community Economics, so I want to, it's always risky, and I hope this isn't an ideological clash. I don't believe it is, but the Community Land Trust way of doing housing, which also has a lot of variance to it, but in some ways relates a great deal, I think, to cooperative housing. And I'm very curious about the intersection. In fact, some of the loans, we're strictly a CDFI lender now. We don't do technical assistance or trade association work anymore. That's in other places. But we have some loans where we have limited equity, actually here in town, 2 of them, limited equity co-ops that sit on community land trust land. And there's interest nationally in exploring that more, so that at the Community Land Trust meeting, the annual meeting, which is going to be in Burlington this year in September, Burlington, Vermont, that is, there's going to be a section on that. So I'm kind of fascinated with that, and I'm not sure what might be next. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is, from a lender's perspective, a couple of things that rang very true is in the CLT, the Community Land Trust industry, also real questions about where does the permanent mortgage come from for a homeowner. And it's a little bit of a different problem, but I think it relates in some ways. So and there's some interesting work going on in that now, which I think is getting somewhere, but too slowly. So I don't know if there's room for collaboration there. And then the secondary market to buy these mortgages once they're made. They're very different than what most secondary markets are used to, and we've talked a lot about that. But again, if there's some room for collaboration between the CLT world and the co-op world on the housing, affordable housing front, that I think would be marvelous. Thanks very much to everybody.
Hi, I'm Janice Clark again from the Housing Assistance Council. I feel like I'm one of the last people to speak about next steps and what we've learned today, so I don't have a lot to add. But what I did hear multiple times from each of you, if we talk about next step, is this idea of collaborations. Collaborations both between the co-ops and among the co-ops, as well as developers of affordable housing and co-ops. I came here today to learn more about how to develop, as a nation, we can develop more housing for seniors, more affordable housing for seniors. And the co-op model makes a lot of sense. And personally, my next step is to see how I can maybe do a training, maybe work with someone to sort of talk to some of the housing developers that we work with, some of the stakeholders in our program, about thinking about the co-op model as a means to develop more or preserve more senior housing.
You know, during my career, I've spent most of it focused on agricultural co-ops, to a lesser extent utility co-ops, but in the last few years we've been kind of branching out and doing a lot of other types of articles. So I just wanted to come today to get a better idea of what's going on in the housing co-op sector, and I thought this was an excellent program. I compliment all the people who made presentations. I thought they were all quite good. Gee, just so many aspects were fascinating to me. The energy, from the fact that they're the least energy efficient type of housing for the manufactured housing to the most, or some of the most energy efficient, is kind of a fascinating aspect to this. The second or third speaker, was it Mr. Simone from that NCB? Simonet, sorry. Yeah, I enjoyed him. I'd like to have heard, talking about the financial collapse of the housing market and could we have averted some of that or with money more wisely spent put into developing housing co-ops for people. Fascinating idea. But anyway, my challenge will be to go home and write a little article at least to capture a few of the highlights of the meeting to let our readers know about it.
Well, my focus has always been, I'm a banker and I'm a developer and I'm a lawyer. So my focus has always been in the area of the share loan, making it work better, trying to make it fit limited equity housing, an issue. And I'm old enough to know the guy who invented the share loan in New York, Mark Luxembourg, chair of the Council of New York Cooperatives and Condominiums. Essentially said, we're having all of these co-op conversions. How are we financing the acquisition of a personal property interest in the co-op interest? Okay? And he invented the share loan, understood that it was a UCC Article 9, securitized lien, and basically invented the share loan. And in a market that understands co-ops, those loans have interest rates that are at par with any other form of housing. And Fannie would buy them at the same rate as any other single family home, and they would tell you clearly, they'd tell NCB every year, your share loans that we buy outperform our single family portfolio. Okay? Now they buy share loans in states that consider those shares personal property, and they buy share loans in states that consider the cooperative interest real estate. Most of them are personal property, but some of them are real estate. In manufactured housing, in community land trusts, okay, what the individual homeowner owns is something that's different from, but every bit as secure as, the real estate of a single family home. And getting that accepted by the market, getting the legal descriptions of, documents for, and saleable financing instruments for, is part of our next step. And it needs to recognize, I think, that we have to solve the problem by characterizing all of these cooperative interests / individual manufactured homes / interests in a home ownership unit on land owned by a community land trust / limited equity shares, whatever. We have to find language that covers them all, regardless of how they're titled, whether they're recorded in the Register of Deeds, whether they're recorded and titled through the Secretary of State's office that does cars, however they're titled in any state, whether they're personal property, whether they're real estate, we have to include them all and characterize them all with one description so that what I call a share loan is a share loan is a share loan. And that makes the market big enough, and that takes the worries for lenders, I hope, to a single concept issue where they're not worried about what the documentation is, and they're not worried about how to sell loans on the secondary market or how to buy loans because they know what the paper looks like, and it always looks like X. All right? And I think that's one of the places we need to go. And the other place that I just found out about is this financing that South Carolina is doing on their electric bill, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be extended to manufactured housing unit replacement as well as upgrade. It's just fantastic.
The real home run for me was the kind of conversation that just happened, because our real point was to begin to build awareness about the co-op model, and in this case, the manufactured co-op model, with a lot of different people, and to connect dots and to get new people talking about it in ways that I think we really accomplished here today. And we'll have even more of it as we take it on the video. And I will mention too, if you go on the CDF website, for those of you who are interested in the home care piece, we did a similar form last year, and the full document of that is online and video presentations, individuals, so you don't, it's not like this, we'll do this one the same way, we break it up in its component parts, so you don't have to wade through the whole day again, but you can go and selectively find pieces that you want to see. But I'm really pleased, because this was, we were intending to start as a conversation, we did, and it's not a new conversation, it's just bringing new people to the table, and it's helped us see where we are in this area and where we need to go. And I think we all have got a lot of good action plan from this. We'll also have a product in that the rural electric community will be figuring out how to boil this down to 1 hour and take it on the road to the rural electrics to make sure that we get some of the same passion reflected and some of the same opportunity. So thank you to everyone for being part of this. It's really been a useful day, and we look forward to keeping a conversation going with all of you. We know how to reach you, we know how to find you, and we intend to stay in touch and hopefully let us know too if there are follow-on issues that you identify or new players you want us to connect to. We want to make sure that happens as well. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next year for whatever that topic will be. Thank you.